Hello, and thank you for joining us on Classic Vinyl Podcast. Of course, this is the podcast where we listen to and review songs and every once in a while an album from the classic vinyl era of the 60s and 70s. And today we're going to be heading east.
Saved my life. I'm going down for the last time.
And they certainly are, because he says it over and over and over. And I don't know if that's, something he's telling his wife, or
I think he might have an addiction problem.
that could be it too. Of course, I'm one of your hosts, Justin. I'm here with my other host, Tyler. If you don't know by the title, obviously, we're going to do Head East, and There's Never Been Any Reason. And we'll get right into it. Let me give you a little history about the band Head East. They're a rock and roll band formed in Champaign, Illinois in 1969, although the band is normally referred to as being from St. Louis, since they spent a lot of time there. I'm not sure exactly why, but their build is from St. Louis, even though they are from Champaign, Illinois.
Well, they are an American band.
Yeah, different band, but they are an American band.
Yeah.
So the band originally consisted of John Schlitt on vocals, Danny Piper on guitars, Roger Boyd on keyboards, Larry Boyd on bass, and Steve Houston on drums. The original band name for Head East was Timations. Kind of an interesting name.
Yeah, it's, I don't know whether they were going with there, but
yeah, I'm not sure. But they did change the band name to Head East shortly after that, which I think is kind of a cool band name. But I would assume that most people haven't even heard of these guys.
Yeah, it was a good choice. And you know what? I think most people have heard these guys. They just haven't. They're not that familiar with the band.
Yeah, I think most people have heard this song, but we'll get into it. So all in all, Head East has released 10 studio albums from 1975 to 2023. They have also released 5 live albums and 1 compilation album, which I find kind of funny because they're kind of a one-hit band, but and 10 total singles. So only 2 of their albums reached the top 100 in the U.S., with their 1979 album, A Different Kind of Crazy, charting at number 96. So it barely cracked the top 100. They did not chart in the UK, but in Canada, they did have 1 album also that charted in the top 100. Their 1979 self-titled album charted at number 98, so barely breaking in. This is a little bit different for us because on this podcast, we do mostly well-known songs, mostly well-known bands, and I think this is a fairly well-known song, but I think most people that know it wouldn't know who the band is. I don't think Head East is a super popular band.
They don't seem to be. But then again, I guess you're in good company with me if you haven't heard of them.
Yeah, so three of their singles hit the top 100 in the U.S., Since You've Been Gone being their only top 50 hit, which reached number 46. Now, that song's a pretty popular song released by Rainbow. I think that's the most popular version of the song. But I think as far as Head East is concerned, even though that was their top charting, this is their most well-known song, and I think a lot of that's due to the movie it was released in. But in Canada, Since You've Been Gone actually charted a little higher. It reached number 64. That was their only charting song in the top 100. So many members of this band have died in the past 20 years, including Mike Somerville, and later members Kurt Hansen, Dan Burney, and Steve Houston have all died. So this band's kind of decimated, but I guess they're still going a little bit. So they continued to tour throughout the years with multiple different lineups, and they are still touring to this day, although Roger Boyd is the only remaining member. So do you want to get the song review?
Yeah.
And now it's time for the song review.
Okay, so today we're doing Head East, and There's Never Been Any Reason. Tyler, what is your history previous to today listening to this song a couple times?
This song gets soundtracked in movies, and it gets radio play.
Yeah, it's played quite frequently.
Yeah, I've heard it on classic rock radio, so I'm fairly familiar with it.
But I'm assuming you did not know the band, and you probably did not know the name of the song.
Did not know the band, didn't know the name of the song, and didn't know that it was not a guy and a woman singing.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. So this song was released on the band's debut album that was titled Flat as a Pancake, which was released by a small record label in 1974. That record label was called Pyramid Records, but because of the success of this song, they were signed to A&M Records, and the album was re-released in June of 1975. The album itself reached number 126 on the charts and is certified gold in the U.S., so it did fairly well. A lot better than any of my albums have ever done.
Yeah, at least half of mine have never gotten that high.
Yeah, the song was recorded at Golden Voice Recording in South Pekin, Illinois, and produced by the band themselves. There's Never Been Any Reason was written by Mike Somerville, and dual vocals are sang by both Steve Houston and John Schlitt. And like you said, everybody always thought one of the vocals was a woman, but it's not.
It sounds like you have a white man singing with a black woman, and it is two white men.
Yes, it certainly is. So the lineup during the recording of this song was John Schlitt on lead vocals, Mike Somerville on guitars, Roger Boyd on the Mini Moog synthesizer, which is amazing in this song, Dan Burney on bass, and Steve Houston on drums. There's two different versions of this song. You've got the album version, which is a little over 5 minutes long, and the single version, which is just barely 3 minutes long. I think pretty much nowadays all you hear is the album version, which is good because I'm pretty sure the single version leaves out that whole synth solo, and that would be
That's
a shame.
tragic, yeah.
Yeah. The song reached only number 68 on the U.S. charts and did not chart in the U.K. or Canada. Love Me Tonight reached number 54, and Since You've Been Gone that I was talking about earlier was their top charting song, hitting number 46, the only one to crack the top 50. And although this song was not their biggest hit, as far as chart success, it's definitely their most popular song and still played to this day on classic rock radio. And this song's kind of interesting because you listen to the lyrics, there's a lot of, indications of white lines about a guy that does a lot of cocaine, but his girlfriend doesn't want him to. But every time he does it, it's his last time. Is that what he's referring to when he's talking about going down for his last time? Who knows? Some have also stated they believe this song's about a soldier returning home from Vietnam. It could be about both. I mean, 1974, 1975, about the time the Vietnam War was ending. So it could have been about that. Could have been about cocaine. It could have been about a woman. It might be complete bullshit and about nothing.
Very possibly, but I mean, if it's about the Vietnam War, it's very that's a stretch of it's very metaphorical, let's say.
And that's what I read that while researching a little bit. A lot of people thought this was about the end of the Vietnam War. I don't see that in any of the lyrics, but who knows? This has been featured in many films, a lot of TV, a lot of commercials. It's been in That 70s Show, Friday Night Lights, and probably most popular in one of my favorite movies of all time, Dazed and Confused.
Be a whole lot cooler if it was.
And it was.
And it was.
So after sitting down and listening to this song pretty much for your first time actively with the purpose of going through the lyrics like you like to do and reviewing it, what are your thoughts on Never Been Any Reason?
I had a wonderful time with this. This was a great one. So we have that beautiful synthesizer opening that it sounds otherworldly leading in. And then you get the drums that join in with the electric guitar as well. And then the vocals start. And it asks you, did you see any action? Did you make any friends? And it seems to me like these are probably questions that his girl is asking him, where he went. Did you see any action or anything? Or did you make any friends at this party or whatever? Maybe that's kind of to get him to reflect on what's his drug use getting him.
Well, that's kind of like the line, did you have any bad dreams? Did you break any glass?
Yeah.
I have a hard time putting that towards the Vietnam War. I mean, that certainly seems metaphorical, but
it seems real straightforward though, right?
Yeah, but it seems straightforward at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to tell, but the lyrics do seem straightforward in this song.
Well, all I know is that I've been angry for years that dang lying Johnson left our boys in Vietnam. I wish I could get past this, but well, I guess that's just going to stick in my craw forever. But,
yeah, well,
he's got these lyrics in here that are kind of tricky for me to place, though. He's like, there's never been a reason for you to think about me. But this is his girl, and he's singing about this in the context of the loving of a sweet woman's better than a white line. He knows that he loves her more than he loves his habit, but boy, maybe he's just too dang addicted to be able to kick the habit.
That's kind of the way I take the song, is that he's got this habit, but he loves his girl, and he knows he loves her more than his habit, but his habit's really controlling him. And so he's constantly promising this is going to be the last time. This is going to be the last time. But that's just my take on the lyrics.
It sure seems like it. All of this culminating in this really strong ending. I mean, this the way that this is orchestrated together with all the instruments and the lyrics, it comes to this awesome finale at the end. And that's the best way that I can put it, because it doesn't fade out. It just comes up to one final like drum smash at the end. There's like that last repeat of the chorus where you just have the bass and cymbals kind of strumming along to accompany the vocals at the end. And it just strips it down to something really basic and pure. And boy, I love that. It sounds beautiful. What are your thoughts on this one, Justin?
Well, I think the first thing that when you get into these songs, that I love the 60s music, I love the 70s music, but when you get into the mid 70s, 74 on, you can really see that production and recording took a huge leap forward. Because the one thing that strikes me about this song is how well it's mixed and how strong it sounds. It could have just as easily been produced today because it's just really powerful. The opening with that Mini Moog synth is amazing. I think it's, even if you don't really know this song, you know the opening of this song, and then it kicks into that recognizable guitar riff. Maybe it's just me, but I hear this song everywhere, and I've loved it ever since I heard it in Dazed and Confused. I think Dazed and Confused come out in 91. It's probably the first time I heard this song, and I remember getting that soundtrack and loved all the music on it. I guess during the recording of this, they actually double-tracked that Mini Moog to give it that thicker sound. One thing about it is the drums are amazing throughout this thing. The bass is nice and thick and amazing throughout this, and that double-tracked Moog solo in the middle is awesome. So I think the single version of this would have kind of sucked without that.
For sure.
Let's be honest, because that's really the really great thing about it. And like I said, the bass is good throughout, but I especially like towards the end, it kind of breaks down and he goes into only vocals with the bass in the background. And I love that part. I think it's really good. And then it does come to that crescendo ending, like you said, and he just keeps saying at the end and going down for the last time. This song's just mixed so well. I like the sound of it. When you listen to a 60s song compared to this, it just makes your sound system sound 100 times better. Mm-hmm. And it's a good song. It's one I've always really enjoyed, and that's why I wanted to do it. I mean, we don't get too much into the deep tracks, but we want to do them every once in a while. And I don't know if this is necessarily a deep track, but it's certainly a deep track band, I guess you would say, just not a band everybody's heard of. And I've listened to a couple other heady songs, and they're kind of just straightforward rock and roll. They're a pretty good band, and they have a lot of guitar sounds to them, and they use the synth well and the organ well where it's used, and maybe something I ought to explore a little more.
Maybe so.
So do you want to rate the song?
Yeah, let's rate it.
Song rating.
Okay, listener, if this is your first episode, I will briefly explain our rating system. It's a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best, 5 being smack in the middle, and I'm going to put this one up at an 8. In fact, as much as I like this, maybe I want to rate it a little higher, and maybe I'm kind of gauging this a little unfairly going off of some other songs from the same era. I really like this song. It just doesn't really come across as much in my wheelhouse.
Well, 8's a pretty strong rating.
It is a pretty strong rating because it's that good of a song. I'm listening to this, and this song belongs in all the places that it goes. I think that it's kind of funny that it gets as much radio play with it talking about woman with a sweet lovin' better than a white line. But I think I've heard some radio stations do that white line with a fine wine. And maybe that's just my mind playing tricks on me.
That could be your mind, because I don't think I've ever heard it changed over or anything, but I could be wrong. But
yeah. I don't know what more to say than that, but where do you put this one, Justin?
Yeah, I think this is a great song. It's always been in my head, and I don't get sick of it. In fact, when it comes on the radio in the car, it's when I want to crank it up because it's got that good mix to it and powerful sound. And I don't generally like the synthesizer, but the way it's used in conjunction with the drums and bass and guitar in this song, I think it fits perfect. Mm-hmm. It would be a great place to have an amazing guitar solo in the middle there. But for some reason, that double track mini Moog synth, I give this an 8.5. I'm kind of ashamed that I haven't spent more time listening to more Head East music, but who knows? Maybe I'll be disappointed because of how much I like this song, and maybe I'll be surprised because there's a lot of music out there that just because it wasn't commercially successful doesn't mean it isn't great.
Yeah, and I think that these guys, with this song alone, it bears looking into them a little bit more. Just because this song's that good.
I think I'm going to. So we'll have to check back at that at some point. So that's Head East, and There's Never Been Any Reason. And like always, send us an email at classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com with any comments or suggestions or songs you'd like us to rate. And I know I always say it, but we really do appreciate you listening. It means a ton to us. And until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.